welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. I almost slept through it. My night shifts at the hospital leave me exhausted. My sleep schedule completely flipped. By the time I get home, it's already morning. By the time I crawl into bed, the world outside is wide awake. I drown out the daylight with blackout curtains and fall asleep to old reruns playing on my TV. That's why I didn't wake up right away when the first emergency alert system, AS, warning blared through my speakers. The robotic drone of the announcer barely registered as I stirred, groggy and disoriented. The only reason I didn't roll over and ignore it was because of the tone. It wasn't the standard weather advisory or amber alert chime. It was lower, distorted, like an old cassette tape warping in the heat. It didn't even follow the usual structure. I reached for my phone, expecting to see a storm warning. Instead, the screen read, "Emergency Alert System. This is a statewide emergency. Keep all lights on. Do not enter dark spaces. Do not look outside." I squinted at it, trying to make sense of the words through my sleep-hazed brain. A prank? A glitch? It didn't make any sense. I checked the time. 4:37 p.m. Damn. I slept the entire day away. The alert had already started repeating by the time I sat up. This is an emergency broadcast. Remain indoors. Keep all lights on. Do not enter dark spaces. Do not look outside. The screen flashed red, then cut to black. Static crackled before my TV resumed playing the sitcom rerun. I blinked at the screen. What the hell was that? I muttered to myself. It had to be a mistake. Some kind of system error. I grabbed my phone and checked social media. Everyone was talking about it. At David M97, WTF was that emergency alert? Anyone else get it? At Laura B, is this some kind of marketing stunt? Hashtag keep all lights on. At News Station 7, breaking. Officials have not yet issued a statement regarding the emergency alert broadcasted statewide at approximately 4:30 p.m. Updates to follow. I scrolled through hundreds of posts, all echoing the same confusion. Some people were already making memes about it. Others thought it was a hoax. But just a few, claimed something felt wrong. At No Sleep 42, not a glitch. My cousin works for a local news station. He says they were told to stay inside and not investigate. No further instructions. What the hell is going on? I frowned and turned on the news. Nothing, not even a mention of the alert. Weird. Usually, even false alarms got some coverage. Instead, they were still airing pre-recorded segments, as if nothing had happened. My apartment was dim despite the late afternoon sunlight bleeding through the edges of my curtains. I turned on my bedside lamp without really thinking about it. Something about the wording of the alert unsettled me. I wasn't the only one. At Jake F, did anyone else's lights just flicker? Or am I just paranoid? At Rachel K, this might be a reach, but has anyone seen their neighbors lately? It's like the whole street is empty. At Greg_live, okay. I turned my lights off just to prove this was BS. Nothing happened. You're all losing it. I shook my head. People were freaking out over nothing. If there was a real emergency, the news would have said something. Still, I glanced toward my bathroom. The door was cracked open, the inside pitch black. Do not enter dark spaces. I exhaled sharply and ran a hand through my hair. This was ridiculous. It was just a dumb alert. Probably a mistake. I swung my legs off the bed and stood up, heading for the bathroom. Before I reached the door, my overhead light flickered. I froze. The bulb buzzed, dimming for a second before stabilizing. My heart skipped a beat. I swallowed and shook my head. Probably a power fluctuation. My apartment complex wasn't exactly known for great wiring. I reached into the bathroom and flicked the light switch. The bulb flickered once, then turned on. The pit in my stomach loosened slightly. See? Nothing to worry about. I went about my usual routine, brushing my teeth, washing my face. But as I shut the water off, I noticed something off in the mirror. The hallway behind me, pitch black beyond the bathroom light. For a split second, I swore I saw something move in that darkness. Not a shape, not a shadow, just movement. A slow, deliberate shift in the blackness. I spun around, my breath catching. Nothing. I stared into the dark for a moment longer before shaking my head and closing the bathroom door. The first disappearance. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a new post from one of the people joking about the alert earlier. At Greg_live. The guy who had turned off his lights just to prove nothing would happen. His friend was now posting from his account. At Paulum, if anyone knows where Greg is, please DM me. He was live streaming, then his screen went black. He's not answering calls. A chill crawled down my spine. I clicked on Greg's profile and opened his last live stream recording. The video buffer stuttered before playing. The camera showed a dimly lit living room. Greg was laughing, talking into the camera. Look guys, I'm turning my lights off. Oh, so scary. He hit the switch. Darkness. Then the sound cut out. For a full 30 seconds, the screen stayed black. The only noise was a faint clicking sound, like nails tapping on glass. Then the screen flashed white for a fraction of a second, too quick to register anything before the feed ended. I rewound, trying to pause at the flash. I wish I hadn't. In that frozen frame, Greg was still sitting on his couch. But he wasn't alone. Something stood behind him, tall, stretched. Its limbs too thin, too long. It had no face. The screen went dark again. My apartment lights flickered. A new emergency alert buzzed on my phone. Emergency alert system. Do not investigate missing persons. Keep all lights on. I turned every single light in my apartment on, and I didn't turn them off. I spent the next few minutes scrolling through the replies under Greg's last post. At Sasha B. Wait, did anyone else see that? Behind him, at user404, bro just straight up vanished. Is this a prank? At Livestream King, I tried pausing at the end. There's something in the room with him. I'm not kidding. At Paulum, I was on a call with him. He stopped talking all of a sudden. I thought he was messing with me, but then the call dropped. He's not answering. I scrolled back up and rewatched the video. My hands felt cold. My apartment lights buzzed softly, the only noise in the room. I didn't want to watch it again, but I had to. I paused on that final frame. Greg's frozen expression, mouth half open, like he had started to scream but never finished. And that thing behind him. I looked away, my pulse hammering. Do not investigate missing persons. The words from the alert pulsed in my brain like a heartbeat. It wasn't just Greg. Other posts started popping up. More people who had ignored the alert. People who thought it was a joke. They were gone. Their social media accounts suddenly inactive. Their last messages cut off mid-sentence. Calls going straight to voicemail. And the people closest to them? They weren't getting answers either. At Dan M., my brother was just playing Xbox with me. He turned off his room light to prove it was fake. Then his mic cut out. I ran to check on him. His door was open. He wasn't there. At Amy J., I thought my roommate left for work, but his car is still outside. His phone is on the kitchen counter. He's just gone. At Survivor 3, the news isn't reporting this. No cops, no investigations. They're just vanishing, and the power keeps flickering. I tried to tell myself it was a hoax. People faking disappearances for clout. Viral marketing for some horror movie. A mass prank, but something deep in my gut told me otherwise. Then my apartment lights flickered again. I held my breath. Not a normal flicker. Not like a power surge. It was slower, almost deliberate, as if something was pressing against the light itself. I grabbed my phone, hesitating before turning on my camera. I didn't even know why I did it. Maybe for proof. maybe to convince myself that I wasn't imagining things. The screen showed my apartment bathed in artificial yellow light. My bed, my cluttered desk, the closed bathroom door. I turned toward the hallway. The moment my camera lens faced the darkness, the screen glitched. Not just static. Shapes, lines of code fracturing. My phone buzzed violently in my hand before shutting off completely. I cursed and nearly dropped it. Do not enter dark spaces. I forced myself to step back, swallowing the panic creeping up my throat. I turned every single light on. The kitchen, the closet, the lamp by the window. I wasn't taking any chances. A loud knock startled me. I jumped, my heart nearly punching through my ribs. It was my neighbor. I lived in a small apartment complex with thin walls, the kind where you knew your neighbors whether you wanted to or not. The guy in the unit across from me, Dave, was one of those people who always had an opinion about something. And right now, he was standing in my doorway, grinning like an idiot. "You see that alert earlier?" he said, jerking a thumb over his shoulder. What a load of crap. I swallowed, still shaken from my phone glitching. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "People are losing their minds over nothing," he continued. "Greg, that live stream dude, total stunt. You'll see. He'll pop back up tomorrow saying it was all a joke." I didn't answer. Dave smirked. "Watch this." Before I could stop him, he turned around and flicked off his porch light. The space behind him went completely black. For a single moment, nothing happened. Then Dave stiffened. His breath hitched in his throat, like he was trying to say something but couldn't. His body locked up, shoulders rigid, fingers twitching at his sides. A split second later, he was gone. Not like he stepped back into the darkness. Not like he ran. Just gone. The air where he stood rippled. A strange distortion, like heat waves rising off asphalt. His porch light flickered back on by itself, and there was nothing there, only his shoes. I slammed my door shut and locked it. Another emergency alert buzzed on my phone. Emergency alert system. Do not investigate missing persons. Keep all lights on. Couldn't breathe. I backed away from the door, my ears ringing. I wanted to believe I was dreaming, but the alert on my screen was real. The empty shoes outside were real. Something had taken Dave. I sat on my bed, gripping my phone like a lifeline. Online, the panic was spreading. At Maya G, I just saw my neighbor disappear. It was like something swallowed him whole. At Ghost Story, guys, what happens if the power goes out? At Survivor 3, stock up on flashlights and candles now. Power companies are already struggling. This is only the beginning. I stared at the last tweet, my blood running cold. Power outages. What happened when everyone's lights started going out? As if on cue, my apartment flickered again. Longer this time. My stomach twisted. I needed to prepare. I grabbed every flashlight I owned, checking the batteries. I searched through drawers, finding old glow sticks from a camping trip years ago. I turned my laptop screen brightness to max and plugged my phone into a backup battery pack. I wasn't risking even a second of darkness. Outside, in the distance, I heard a sound, faint, like clicking, slow, steady, not quite insect-like, not quite mechanical, something walking. I shut my curtains tight and didn't look outside. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, every light in my apartment burning bright. My laptop screen glowed beside me, a browser full of open tabs, news sites, emergency broadcasts, forums. None of them had answers. Official sources weren't acknowledging the disappearances. News stations reported technical difficulties. Social media was the only place where the truth was leaking through. Too many people were gone, more every hour. The pattern was clear. They all made the same mistake. They turned off the lights. Outside, the distant clicking sound hadn't stopped. I didn't know if it was coming from the hall, the street, or something worse. I didn't want to find out. I checked my phone. Battery still over 80%. My backup power bank had 2 full charges left. I wasn't taking any chances, but then the power went out. The world plunged into darkness. My breath caught in my throat. A second later, my emergency flashlight flooded the room with white light. My hands were shaking as I gripped it, scanning the walls, the corners, the doorway. Nothing moved. I scrambled for my phone, checking Twitter. The app took forever to load. My Wi-Fi was dead. The only posts coming through were from people losing power just like me. At user_567. Power just went out in my apartment. Flashlights still work. I think I hear something moving in the hall. At Maddie_J. It's not just a blackout. Took my brother. I watched it happen. He had a candle, but it wasn't enough. At Survivor 3, batteries, glow sticks, screen light, keep them close. If you see the shadows move, do not blink. I swallowed hard, my heart hammering. I needed more light. My glow sticks. I ripped one from the plastic, bent it until the liquid inside cracked and ignited a sickly green glow. Then another. Then another. I lined them along my bed, my desk, my floor. Anywhere that couldn't afford to go dark. The air felt wrong, the kind of heavy stillness before a storm, thick and expectant. I turned toward my apartment door. The bottom gap, a sliver of space that normally glowed with hallway light, was pitch black. The entire building was dark. Something creaked outside, a floorboard, or something pressing against it. I held my breath. Another creak. Closer. Then a knock. I nearly dropped the flashlight. It was soft. Too soft. Tap. Not a knock. And then a voice. Hey, you still in there? I recognized it. Dave. My stomach turned to ice. No. No, no, no. I saw him disappear. I saw the shoes he left behind. You there, man? The voice was casual, familiar. Power's out, but I got extra flashlights. Thought you might need one. I didn't answer. I gripped the flashlight tighter, aiming it at the door like it would do something. Pause. Then, come on, dude. Open up. It's me. The voice was wrong. It was too close to being right, but just off enough that my body knew before my brain did. I stayed silent. The doorknob twisted. Let me in. I backed away. Do not investigate missing persons. That wasn't Dave. That thing outside wasn't human. It knocked again, firmer this time. You okay? Your lights are still on. A soft chuckle. Come on, man, let me in. I held my breath. I turned my phone camera toward the door and tapped record. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the light beneath the door shifted. A shadow blocked it out. I just knew that if I turned the knob, I wouldn't see Dave standing there. I wouldn't see anything. And then, just as suddenly, silence. The air thinned again, like whatever had been pressing against my door was gone. I stayed frozen for nearly a minute. Then I crawled forward, hesitating before placing my hand against the door. The wood was ice cold. Another emergency alert flashed across my phone screen. Emergency alert system. Avoid contact with the missing. Do not open your doors. Do not acknowledge them. I let out a shaky breath. Who was sending these alerts? They were the only authority acknowledging what was happening. Some government agency or someone who knew more than they should. I went back to Twitter. The panic had escalated. At Ghosted 5, I saw my girlfriend vanish right in front of me. She turned off the lamp for 2 seconds. 2 seconds. And she was just gone. At Maya G, they're pretending to be people we lost. They're knocking. They're calling our names. Do not listen. At Survivor 3, this is it. This is how it starts. The power grid is failing. Once we lose electricity completely, it's over. That last tweet had over 50,000 likes. I clenched my jaw, my stomach twisting into knots. Because he was right. I had light now, but for how long? And what happened when the last bulb burned out? I needed backup, supplies, batteries, something stronger than glow sticks. But that meant going outside. It meant risking the dark. The thought made me sick. I glanced at my watch. 3:42 a.m. If I could last until morning, maybe, **, **, I could figure something out. Then my flashlight flickered. My flashlight flickered again. Quick stutter. A momentary dip in brightness, then steady again. But that split second was enough to make my stomach lurch. I turned it over in my hands, checking the battery indicator. Still half full. No reason for it to be failing. I swallowed, gripping it tighter. The glow sticks weren't enough. My phone screen wasn't enough. And this flashlight, this one lifeline, was starting to fail. I had to do something. The power could come back. Maybe. But if it didn't, if this blackout was part of whatever was happening, I needed more light. I needed to move. I crawled toward my closet. I knew what I was looking for. I just had to get to it. The floorboards were too loud beneath me. Every shift of my weight felt like it echoed. I had the horrible thought that something was listening, waiting. I yanked open the closet door and reached inside. My hands found the box of old camping gear, tossed aside, forgotten, but still useful. I rummaged through it, tossing aside junk until I found the lantern, heavy, metal, battery-powered. I clicked the switch. Nothing. I popped open the bottom. The batteries inside had corroded. The acid left a crusted, white residue. Dead. I cursed under my breath. I needed fresh batteries. I had some, but not enough, for AAs sat in my desk drawer, but the lantern took 6. I needed more. I thought of my kitchen, the junk drawer near the fridge. Maybe there were extras in there. The idea of leaving my room made my skin crawl, but I had no choice. I pushed myself up, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The glow sticks spread across the room cast their weak, sickly green light over the walls. I inched toward the door, turned the handle, and slowly, slowly, eased it open. The hallway was a cavern of black. The emergency lights in the building were out. Normally, red exit signs glowed at the far ends, but now nothing. My flashlight cut through the dark. The beam stretched just far enough to show the hallway carpet, the edges of doors, the emptiness. I swallowed hard. I had to move fast. The kitchen was only a few feet away. 3 steps. That's all. I stepped forward. The floor groaned. I froze. The sound echoed. Like something heard it, like something shifted in response. I forced myself to keep going. 1 step, then another. I reached the kitchen, yanking the drawer open. I shoved aside pens, old receipts, batteries. I grabbed a handful, turning them over in my palm. 2 AAs. Not enough. I cursed under my breath. I needed a new plan. Then something moved behind me. I spun around, flashlight aimed at the hallway. Nothing, just empty air. The silence stretched too long. A waiting silence. Then the knock. My blood ran ice cold. It was further down the hall. Not at my door this time. Someone else's, or something pretending to be. I held my breath. A soft voice drifted through the dark. "Hey, you in there?" A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. "You okay?" A beat of silence. A slow, deliberate twist of a doorknob. Then a second voice. From another door. A man. "Let me in." Then another. A child. "Please." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I gripped the flashlight tighter, stepping backward, away from the hallway. The voices kept coming. Too many. Too fast. Tapping. Knocking. Scratching. Somewhere far away, something dragged across the floor. A sharp, slow scrape. I slammed my bedroom door shut, locked it, and waited. I sat against the door, flashlight clenched in my hands. The knocking continued outside. Not at my door. Not yet, but close. Too close. Then the alert tone blared. My phone buzzed violently against the floor. I scrambled for it, nearly dropping it in my rush. Another emergency alert. Emergency alert system. The power will not return. They will come in greater numbers. You must find a way to survive. My chest tightened. The power wasn't coming back. This wasn't temporary. My stomach churned as I stared at those words. If the power was gone, what happened when the sun went down? The voices outside faded. Not all at once. Not like they had disappeared. They just moved on, looking for someone else, looking for another door to knock on. I sat there for what felt like hours. Then I checked my phone again. The time. 4:28 a.m. Sunrise was in a few hours. If I could make it until morning, if sunlight was enough to keep them away, maybe I'd have a chance. But I still needed light. More than glow sticks. More than my dying flashlight. There was only one option left. I had to go outside. I didn't want to go outside, but I had to. The emergency alert repeated in my head, over and over. The power will not return. There was no fixing this. There was no waiting it out. I needed light, and if I stayed locked in my room, I'd run out of batteries before the night was over. I gripped the flashlight tighter, feeling the smooth metal pressing into my palm. It was still working for now, but I had no idea when the flickering would start again. I had to move before that happened. I unlocked my bedroom door and eased it open. The hallway stretched out before me, a black, silent void. No emergency lights, no exit signs, just the weak glow of my flashlight bouncing off the walls. The voices from before were gone, but I had the terrible feeling that they weren't far. I stepped out. The floorboards creaked under my weight, but I forced myself to move forward. Slow, careful steps. I had a plan, sort of. There was a hardware store about 3 blocks away. If I could make it there, I might be able to find batteries, lanterns, even candles. Anything to keep the dark away. If it was even still open. If it wasn't infested. I swallowed hard. No turning back now. I made it to the stairwell. The door was propped open. That wasn't right. It should have closed automatically. I hesitated at the threshold, shining my flashlight inside. The stairs spiraled downward, disappearing into nothingness. I could barely see past the first landing. The beam of my light didn't reach far enough, and the lower levels were too quiet. I listened, held my breath. No footsteps, no movement, just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I stepped inside. Every step down felt wrong, like I was descending into something I wasn't supposed to see. The flashlight trembled slightly in my grip. I tightened my hold. I was halfway down the first flight when I heard it. A soft shuffling. Far below. It was faint, slow, but it was there. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The sound continued for a moment, then stopped, like whoever or whatever was down there had heard me and was listening back. I didn't wait to find out. I turned and ran back up. I hit the 3rd floor landing and shoved the door open. My own apartment was on the 4th, but I couldn't go back there. I needed another way out. I knew there was a fire escape somewhere. I just had to find it. I kept moving, sweeping my flashlight along the hallway. The beam caught on something at the far end, a door leading to the emergency exit. I rushed toward it. My hand closed around the handle, and then the knocking started again. Not at a single door, all of them. A wave of knocking, pounding, tapping, scratching. Doors rattling on their hinges. Somewhere down the hall, a voice. Too soft, too calm. Hello. I didn't wait. I threw the fire escape door open and stepped out into the cold night air. The city below was a graveyard. Black buildings, dark streets, no headlights, no neon signs, just nothing. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. It was the people, or what was left of them. They stood in the streets, not moving. Hundreds of them, their outlines barely visible in the dark, standing like shadows frozen in place, facing buildings, facing doors, waiting. I felt my breath hitch, and then one of them turned, slow, deliberate, like it heard me. The others followed, one by one, heads tilting upward, looking at me. Their faces were wrong, too smooth, no eyes, just empty, stretched skin, like something had erased their features, like something had made them blank. A low hum filled the air, distant at first, growing louder, came from everywhere, a chorus of empty voices. I stepped back. The fire escape groaned beneath my weight, too loud. The heads snapped upward. The hum stopped, and then they moved, fast. I bolted down the metal stairs, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my grip. I hit the 2nd floor landing, leaping the last few steps. The figures below were swarming, moving toward the building. I had to get out before they reached me. I gripped the railing and climbed down, skipping the last rungs, and then the street lights flickered, a surge of power. For a moment, the world was bathed in yellow. I could see them clearly now. Their skin was cracked, their hands long and stretched, their bodies too thin like shadow puppets made real, and their heads twisting, faces stretching, contorting into grotesque imitations of people, mouths forming where there had been nothing, grinning, not in a human way, in a way that didn't make sense, too wide, too jagged, like something trying to mimic a smile but getting it wrong. Then the streetlights died again. Darkness swallowed the street, and they were closer. I didn't think, I just ran. I hit the pavement and sprinted toward the hardware store. My flashlight beam shook in my hands. The humming started again, a droning, low vibration in the air, the same pitch as the emergency alert tone. I didn't look back, didn't want to see how close they were. I focused on the store up ahead. Just a few more steps, a slam, metal against pavement. I risked a glance and saw a manhole cover slide open. Something was crawling out. The store was right there. I reached it, grabbed the handle, locked. I yanked on it. Nothing. The humming grew louder. The figures were closing in. Then, a voice from inside. "Turn off your light." I whipped around. Behind the glass, a pair of wide eyes. A hand reaching toward the lock. "Turn it off." I hesitated. The street behind me. A shifting sea of darkness. Grinning mouths. Humming. I clicked my flashlight off. The door swung open. I dove inside, and the world went black. I hit the floor hard. The door slammed shut behind me, sealing the night outside. Darkness swallowed everything. Couldn't see, couldn't breathe. I lay there, heart hammering, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then, a hand grabbed my arm. "Don't move," a whisper, right next to my ear. I stiffened, the grip tightened, and then shuffling outside. Not footsteps, not running, drifting, like something was sliding over the pavement. Low hums vibrated through the walls, long, droning notes that set my teeth on edge. I clamped my mouth shut, barely breathing. The hand didn't let go. We stayed like that, still, silent, waiting. Minutes passed, maybe more. Then the humming faded. The night outside grew quiet. Finally, the grip on my arm loosened. "You can move now." A soft click. Dim, red light flickered on. I turned, blinking. A man crouched beside me, older, maybe 40, worn out hoodie, dark circles under his eyes, a flashlight in his other hand, covered with red cellophane. "Get up," he said. "We don't have much time." I sat up, my limbs aching. The store was wrecked, shelves overturned, broken glass glinting in the weak red glow, empty racks where batteries should have been. The man stood, rubbing a hand over his face. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You almost got yourself killed," he muttered. I swallowed, my throat dry. "What were those things?" His gaze flicked toward the front door, then back to me. "You don't want to know." He turned and walked deeper into the store. I hesitated, then followed. The back room was barricaded, metal shelves pushed against the walls, boxes stacked in front of a second door. A single lantern sat on a crate, wrapped in red plastic. Everything was red. I frowned. He sat down on a worn-out mattress, motioning for me to do the same. "You got a name?" I hesitated. "Alex." He nodded. "Dean." Dean reached into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled flyer. He handed it to me. I smoothed it out. A list of rules, typed in plain, blocky letters. Some of them were crossed out. Some had been added by hand. My stomach twisted as I read. Rules for survival. Do not go outside at night. Keep all lights on. If the lights flicker, leave immediately. Do not look at them. Do not listen to them. Do not answer the knocking. Red light is safe. Flashlights will not always work. Some of them remember. If you hear your own voice, run. My hands trembled as I lowered the page. "What the hell is this?" Dean rubbed his temples. "You saw them, didn't you?" I nodded slowly, his jaw tensed. "They weren't always like that." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, staring at the floor. "They used to be people." A cold weight settled in my stomach. I wanted to argue, say that wasn't possible, but I'd seen them, too many, standing in the streets, faceless, waiting. My voice came out hoarse. "What happened to them?" Dean hesitated. Then finally, "They stayed in the dark too long." I gripped the paper tighter. None of this made sense. The emergency alert, the lights going out, the things outside, and now this, people turning into whatever those were. I shook my head. "How do you know all this?" Dean's expression darkened. "Because I've seen it before." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The first time it happened, I thought it was a blackout." His fingers tapped against his leg, like he was counting something. "Then the alerts came, told everyone to stay inside, keep the lights on. But the power wasn't coming back." His eyes flicked to me. "You know what people do when the lights go out?" I shook my head. "They panic." A humorless chuckle. "Some ran. Some went looking for help. Some thought it was a joke. His face hardened. They didn't come back. Silence hung between us. Then he pointed at the list. Those rules? They're all we've got. I glanced at them again. Some were obvious. Others, I pointed to the last one. If you hear your own voice, run. A chill crept up my spine. What does this mean? Dean's jaw clenched. You don't want to find out. A deep thud echoed from outside. We both froze. Not knocking, not scratching. Something heavier, like something had just dropped onto the roof. Dean moved fast. He killed the lantern, plunging us into near darkness. Only the faint glow of his red flashlight remained. He motioned for me to stay still. I held my breath. The noise above us shifted. A slow, dragging scrape. Something was crawling, moving across the ceiling. Listening, waiting. Then a voice, right outside the door. My voice. Let me in. I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. The voice was exactly like mine. Same tone, same cadence. Sounded wrong, flat, emotionless. Let me in. My stomach twisted. Dean's grip tightened on my arm. I turned to him, my breath shallow. His expression was stone cold. He raised a single finger to his lips. Stay silent. The thing outside knocked once, twice, 3 times. Then silence. We stayed still. Minutes passed. Finally, Dean exhaled. That was close. I could barely speak. I could still hear the echo of my own voice, asking to be let in. Dean stood, his face grim. You see why we follow the rules now? I swallowed hard and nodded. Dean didn't move for a long time. Neither did I. The voice, my voice, still rang in my ears. Mimicry, could talk, could copy. I tried to steady my breathing. The room was dim, the red glow from Dean's flashlight casting long, unnatural shadows. I kept my gaze fixed on the door, half expecting it to open on its own. How often does that happen? I finally whispered. Dean exhaled through his nose. More than it used to. He stood up, stretching his arms. His joints cracked. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe longer. I looked back at the list. My fingers trembled slightly as I traced the last rule again. If you hear your own voice, run. But it didn't come in, I said slowly. Dean gave me a sharp look. Don't test your luck. They're not always patient. A slow, scraping sound raked across the roof. I stiffened. Dean grabbed my arm again, tighter this time. He mouthed, "Don't move." I obeyed. The sound continued, something dragging across the surface. Then a tap, just a single soft tap against the ceiling, like a finger. Then another and another, a slow, rhythmic drumming of something tapping, moving, feeling along the structure. A long exhale left Dean's lips, barely audible. Do they know we're in here? I mouthed. Dean's eyes darted to the ceiling. His fingers curled into fists. Doesn't matter, he whispered. Stay still. Stay quiet. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then a sudden, violent thud. The whole roof shook. Dust rained from the rafters. I clenched my jaw, fighting the instinct to bolt. Dean held up a hand. Wait, nothing. Then, something slid off the roof and landed outside with a wet crunch. I swallowed. Dean slowly exhaled. It's gone. I hesitated. How do you know? His lips pressed into a thin line. Because if it wanted in, we'd already be dead. I forced myself to relax, but the tension in my chest remained. I looked around the room again. There were cans of food, water jugs, and stacks of batteries. A survival setup. How long have you been here? I asked. Dean sat back down on the mattress, rubbing a hand over his face. Too long. His voice was hoarse, hollow. This used to be my town, he muttered. Before all this, before the lights. I waited. He didn't continue. Instead, he pointed at the list again. You understand now? This isn't some dumb prank. You follow the rules or you die. I nodded. Dean studied me for a moment. Then he tossed a small red flashlight my way. Here. You'll need it. I caught it, the plastic warm in my hands. Red light is safe, I murmured, remembering the rule. Dean nodded. They hate it. Why? A pause. Then, no one knows. I leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. Something about this whole thing felt wrong. I tried to remember the first alert, the message, the instructions. Keep all lights on. a warning, or a command. I looked at Dean. Who sent out the emergency alerts? His face darkened. The government, he said flatly. But how much did they really know? That part he didn't answer. A distant scream shattered the silence. We both flinched. It wasn't human. A high, warbling sound, like a distorted recording of a person. I gritted my teeth. Dean was already standing. We can't stay here forever, he muttered. His words sent a chill through me. You mean we have to leave? He nodded, grim. The power's not coming back. If the grid's gone, that means the last safe places are going dark. We don't want to be here when that happens. I felt a cold pit in my stomach. No power meant no lights, and no lights meant we won't survive, I whispered. Dean's jaw tightened. No. Silence stretched between us. For the first time, the weight of my situation hit me. This wasn't just about tonight. There was no help coming, no rescue. The whole town was lost. I clutched the flashlight tighter. Where do we go? Dean looked toward the back door. West. There's an old power station outside town. If it still has backup generators, we might be able to. A knock at the door. We both froze. Not the front door, the back door. The one leading into the barricaded storeroom. A single, deliberate knock. Then another, and another. Knock. 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 I could barely breathe. Dean's face had gone completely pale. Then, a voice. Not mine this time. A woman's. Dean. The blood drained from his face. His eyes went wide. I'd never seen fear like that before. The knock came again. Harder. Dean, it's me. Let me in. His breathing turned shallow. His fingers dug into the mattress. The voice outside sounded desperate. Please. It's so dark out here. I'm scared. I glanced at him. His hands were shaking. Who is that? I whispered. Dean's throat bobbed as he swallowed. My wife, he whispered. I felt ice run through my veins. A long silence. Then, another knock. Dean, the voice whispered, soft, almost loving. You left me out here. The breath caught in my throat. Dean's face was rigid. His eyes locked on the door. He didn't move, didn't blink. I saw something flicker behind his expression. Pain, regret. The voice outside spoke again. It's okay, baby. Just let me in. A single tear slipped down Dean's cheek. He reached toward the door. I grabbed his arm. Dean, no. His breath was ragged. His fingers twitched. The knock came again. Softer, gentle. I gripped his arm tighter. That's not her, I whispered. Dean shut his eyes. The thing outside laughed. A slow, quiet, knowing laugh. Then silence. We sat there in the dark. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Dean let out a shaky breath. And I knew we needed to get the hell out of here before it came back. We sat there in the dark, listening to nothing. The thing outside was gone. At least I hoped it was. Dean hadn't moved. His eyes were still locked on the door. His fingers curled into fists. I could feel the tension in his body, the barely contained grief bleeding into his expression. That thing, whatever it was, had used his wife's voice, and he almost let it in. I let out a slow, controlled breath. We need to leave. Now. Dean didn't answer. I shook his shoulder. Dean, nothing. He just kept staring. Dean, look at me, I whispered, forcing my voice to stay steady. Slowly, he turned his head. His eyes were hollow. I squeezed my flashlight. You said we had to get to the power station. We don't have time to sit here. And a sudden thump made us both flinch. Not at the door. Above us, the roof. Something was back. Dean's breath hitched. I turned off my flashlight. A slow, deliberate scraping sound echoed above. Something walking, no crawling. The air in the room felt tight, suffocating. Dean slowly reached out, grabbing the rifle by his side. Don't shoot, I mouthed. He nodded. Another thump. Closer. My fingers clenched around the flashlight, knuckles white. The sound moved, circling, then stopping directly above us. Silence. Then a whisper, so soft I barely heard it. I see you. My lungs stopped working. Dean squeezed his eyes shut. The whisper came again, curling around the edges of the room. I see you. It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't his wife's. It wasn't human. And then started laughing. A slow, ragged sound, half-choked and wrong. I could feel my pulse in my throat. The thing above us shifted again, moving toward the edge of the roof. Another wet thump, then nothing. Silence. Was it gone? I didn't move, didn't breathe. Dean kept his grip on the rifle, his jaw tight. We waited. 1 minute, 2. Then, somewhere outside, the streetlights flickered. I saw the glow through the boarded-up window. A weak, flickering pulse of light. Dean stiffened. "That's impossible," he muttered. I swallowed. "What does it mean?" His face was grim. "It means we're out of time." We packed in less than a minute. Dean grabbed a bag from the corner, stuffing it with ammo, batteries, and food. I held my flashlight tight, still shaken from the whispering thing on the roof. "You still know the way to the power station?" I asked. Dean nodded. "Yeah, then let's move." We unlatched the back door. Cold air rushed in, stale and wrong. The town was dead, and yet the streetlights were still flickering, a sickly, failing glow, like something was trying to keep them on. I stepped out first, keeping the red light low. Dean followed. The pavement was damp. It hadn't rained. I didn't think about that too hard. "Stick to the buildings," Dean whispered. We moved fast, keeping low. No wind, no movement, only the distant hum of dying power. Something about it made my stomach twist. The lights had been off for days, so why were they trying to turn back on? We crossed an alley, stepping over something wet. I didn't look down. Dean stopped at a corner, pressing his back against the brick. He peered out, then stiffened. "What?" I whispered. His expression darkened. "We're not alone." I followed his gaze. At the end of the street, just past a flickering street lamp, stood a figure, tall, unmoving. The silhouette was wrong, too thin, too stretched, like its limbs had been pulled in ways they shouldn't. And its eyes, they were fixed on us. Two hollow, glowing pits. I gritted my teeth. "What the hell is that?" Dean's hand twitched toward his rifle. Then the thing moved, not walked, not ran, jerked, a sudden, impossible lurch forward. And then it was closer, too close. The street lamp above it shattered. Darkness swallowed it whole. My pulse slammed against my ribs. Dean grabbed my arm. "Run!" We bolted. The bag on Dean's back clanked with every step. The streets blurred, the buildings whipping past. I didn't dare look back, didn't breathe, just kept running. Somewhere behind us, something screeched. A high, sharp static noise, the sound of pure wrongness. Dean veered left. I followed. A narrow alley. We shoved through, hitting the next street, and skidded to a halt. Another figure, standing under a streetlight, too tall, too still, his head tilted. I clenched my jaw. "We're trapped," I whispered. Dean looked around, desperate. Then he spotted something. An old hardware store. A sign hung crookedly above the door, barely visible in the flickering glow. "Stein's Tools." Dean grabbed my sleeve. "In here." We dashed across the road. The glass door groaned as we shoved it open. We slipped inside, slamming it shut behind us. I held my breath. Outside, the streetlight died. Total darkness. I pressed my back against the counter, heart hammering. Dean peeked out the window. His breath came slow, measured. "Is it still there?" I whispered. He didn't answer. I felt the weight of the silence. Heavy, unnatural. Then, after what felt like an eternity, a knock at the door. Not a human knock, not a request. It was testing the glass. Dean's hand tightened around the rifle. Another knock, then a voice. "Please," it whispered. My blood turned to ice. A pause. Then, in a tone that almost sounded like my own, "Let me in." The voice outside the glass sounded almost right, almost human, almost me. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to stay still. Dean's hand didn't leave his rifle. Another knock. "Please," a whisper, not desperate, not pleading, patient, like it knew something we didn't. I felt my stomach turn. It wasn't trying to break in. It wanted us to open the door. Dean inhaled slowly, steadying himself. Then, without taking his eyes off the door, he whispered, "We need to move deeper inside." I nodded, gripping my flashlight. We backed away. The knock came again, but this time it wasn't just at the door. A soft tap, tap, tap against the window. 1, 2, then 3 different knocks. My fingers went numb. There was more than one of them. We moved fast, slipping between empty shelves and display racks. Dust covered everything. Tools, rusted cans, old flashlights, all useless. I tightened my grip on my own light, feeling the weight of it in my palm. Dean led the way, his movements careful but quick. The deeper we went, the darker it got. The only light now came from the flickering bulbs outside. A dull, dying hum. The building was bigger than I expected. Rows of forgotten supplies, an old counter, a door leading to the back storage. Dean hesitated. I could see the calculation in his eyes. That might be our only way out, I whispered. He nodded, testing the knob. It was unlocked. We slipped inside, shutting the door behind us. The air was heavy. Still, Dean clicked on his own flashlight, sweeping it across the room. Shelves, crates, stacks of old supplies, and at the very back, a metal door. Dean exhaled. That leads to the alley. A way out. Relief tried to creep in, but then a sound. Not from outside, not from the front, from inside the storage room. Something was here with us. The beam of Dean's flashlight trembled as it swept over the space. Nothing, no movement, just rows of rusted tools, crates stacked high, dust coating everything. But I could feel it, presence, a wrongness. I kept my own light low, barely illuminating the space. Dean took a slow step forward. I followed. Something creaked. Not us. I turned sharply, light flashing past the shelves. Nothing. Dean shifted his grip on the rifle. "We move fast," he murmured. I nodded. Then a whisper from the shelves. "Don't turn around." My entire body locked. The voice was right behind me. I felt it. Close. Too close. A breath on my neck. I clenched my jaw. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Dean's eyes flicked to me. He heard it too. Then a hand touched my shoulder. I spun, flashed the light, and for half a second, I saw it. Something tall, something wrong, a smile too wide, and then it was gone, like it had never been there. But I knew it had been. My skin burned where it had touched me. Dean grabbed my arm. "Go. Now." We bolted, through the storage room, past the shelves, straight to the metal door. Dean shoved it open, a wall of darkness outside. No streetlights, no glow, just an abyss. My heart hammered. Dean hesitated. "We don't have a choice," I said. He nodded. We stepped out. The alley was silent, a narrow space between the buildings, stretching into the black. I glanced up. The sky was empty. No stars, no moon, like something had swallowed them whole. Dean moved first, leading us along the alley wall. The air was thick, wrong, like walking through something alive. A single street lamp flickered at the far end. A dying glow. That was our way out. We moved fast. Each step felt heavier, like the darkness was pulling us down. Halfway through, Dean muttered, "Something's watching us." I didn't need to ask how he knew. I felt it too. That crawling sensation on the back of my neck. The weight of invisible eyes. And then the light ahead of us went out. Total blackness. We froze. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Then, in the pitch dark, I heard it. A scrape. A slow, deliberate dragging sound. Coming from the mouth of the alley. Right where we needed to go. Then another sound. Behind us. From the way we came. Dean's breathing turned sharp. "We're surrounded," he whispered. My pulse pounded. The alley stretched out in both directions, now filled with something. Moving. Waiting. Dean clicked on his flashlight. The beam flickered, then died. I flicked mine on. Nothing. No power. The darkness pressed in. Something laughed. From both ends of the alley, a whisper followed. "The last light is going out." I clenched my fists. Not yet. I reached into my bag, fingers shaking, grasped one last thing. A flare. A single red flare. Dean saw it. His jaw tightened. I pulled the cap. Sparks erupted. Red light flooded the alley. And in that instant, I saw them. Tall, twisted things. Bodies stretched into unnatural shapes. Mouths open too wide. Faces shifting like melting wax. Dozens of them. Maybe more. All waiting. Just beyond the edge of the light. Dean grabbed my arm. "Run." And we did. Straight into the darkness. Straight toward the power station. We ran. The flare burned red in my hand, casting flickering shadows against the alley walls. The creatures didn't chase us outright. They moved differently. Silent, gliding figures at the edge of the light. Waiting for the flare to go out. Dean was a step ahead, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. The power station was close, just a few blocks away. We had a chance. Tiny, dying chance. I just had to keep the light alive long enough to reach it. But then the flare sputtered. The station came into view, a squat, concrete building surrounded by chain link fencing. A rusted gate hung open, swaying in the wind. Beyond it, darkness. No floodlights, no hum of electricity. Dead. The last station in town, and it was already gone. I swallowed back the rising panic. "We can still fix this," Dean said. He didn't sound convinced. Neither was I, but we ran through the gate anyway. The flare dimmed. A sharp pop, sputtering embers. My heart lurched. Not yet, not yet. I shook it, trying to keep the flame alive. It only flickered lower. Dean yanked open the station door. Inside, pitch black. We hesitated. Then, behind us, a whisper. I didn't turn around. Didn't dare. We stepped inside, and the flare went out. The dark swallowed us whole. I couldn't see my hands. Couldn't see Dean. The silence was suffocating. Then, a sound. From the far end of the room. A low, wet breathing. I fumbled for my flashlight, even though I knew it was useless. Dean reached for me. His grip was ice cold. "This way," he whispered. We moved forward, shuffling through the dark. The air smelled of burnt wires and rot. We were blind, but we weren't alone. The breathing followed us. Slow, patient, so close. Our feet hit metal. A ladder, leading up. Dean went first, moving fast. I followed, hands shaking as I climbed. Halfway up, a hand brushed my ankle. I kicked out, hit something soft, something that didn't move. My stomach lurched. I scrambled the rest of the way up. Dean pulled me onto the platform, slamming the hatch shut behind us. The breathing stopped. For now, we were in a control room. The emergency panel sat against the far wall, covered in dust and grime. Dead screens, broken buttons, and one final switch, a main breaker. Dean moved first, wiping dirt from the label. Power grid reset. He turned to me. "We get this back on. The lights come back." His voice was tight, like he didn't believe it. Neither did I, but we had nothing else. Dean gritted his teeth and pulled the switch. Nothing happened. The silence stretched. Then a soft click, a deep, mechanical hum. Somewhere below us, gears turned. Electricity stirred. Then light, a single flickering bulb above us. Outside, the security lights flicked on. The street lamps glowed weakly. For the first time in hours, the town had light again. I exhaled, gripping the console to keep my hands from shaking. Dean let out a sharp, relieved laugh. It worked. It actually worked. Then the lights flickered. My stomach dropped. No. Another flicker. Then darkness. The station went dead again. And this time, it wasn't coming back. The glass window behind us cracked. Not shattered, just a single, thin fracture creeping across the pane. Something was out there, watching, waiting. Dean's breathing turned sharp. I reached for my rifle. We had two choices: stay here in the dark, or go back out there. We didn't get to decide. The window burst open, and the room was filled with them. I fired blindly. The muzzle flash lit up the control room in bursts, figures moving too fast, hands that were too long, faces that were shifting. Dean shouted. Something grabbed me. I kicked, struggled, but it was so strong. The grip burned ice cold. A voice, right next to my ear. "No more light." I screamed. Then nothing. I woke up in the street, alone. The sky was dark. The street lights were dead. No hum of electricity, no sound, just emptiness. Dean was gone. The station was gone. Even the buildings looked wrong, like they'd been abandoned for years. I stood on shaky legs, gripping my flashlight, clicked it on. Nothing. I was alone. Or maybe I wasn't. Then a sound, a radio crackling, somewhere nearby. I turned. A convenience store. This neon open sign flickering weakly. Inside, a radio broadcast playing. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. Through the dusty window, I saw a television behind the counter. It was showing an emergency alert, the same one I'd seen before. "Keep all lights on." Then the message changed. The letters warped, glitched. New words crawled across the screen. "There is no more light." The radio crackled again. A voice, familiar, too familiar. It was my own, repeating the same sentence, over and over and over. I took a step back. The neon sign went out, and then the dark took everything.